This presentation is for educating exceptional students. During this presentation, I will be discussing the 10 disabilities that can be seen in schools and how we as future educators need to be prepared to handle these disabilities and how we can help our students who experience these disabilities. So the 10 disabilities that I will be discussing in today's presentation include communication disorders, learning disabilities, ADHD, emotional and behavioral disorders, intellectual disabilities, autism, hearing, traumatic brain injuries, vision, and giftedness. The first disorder that I am going to be talking about today is communication disorders. Communication disorders affect how children speak, understand speech, read, and write. Some examples of these disorders include morphology disorders, apraxia disorders, and fluency disorders. Some ways that I can help my students with these disorders is to use assistive technology such as augmentative and alternative communication, also known as AACs. I can also put apps on students' devices that help with pronunciation, reading, and writing. I can also use both text and audio formats in my lessons. And for assignments, instead of just assigning a written paper, I can also assign PowerPoints, iMovies, podcasts, or dramatic performances. This would give these students the creativity to express their project and would also give them the option to complete it as most comfortable for them. The second disorder that I am going to be discussing today is learning disabilities. Specific learning disabilities are defined as a disorder in one or more of the basic psychological processes involved in understanding or in using language, spoken or written. So learning disabilities are the most prevalent of all disabilities. They affect 36% of students with disabilities. Boys are 2 times as likely to be identified with learning disabilities rather than girls. There's no type of typical student with a learning disability. So some examples of learning disabilities include dyslexia, memory problems, and math difficulties. Some ways that I can help my students with learning disabilities are to use graphic organizers. The graphic organizers present information before the students learn it, and this can be really helpful for them. The third disability that I am going to be talking about is ADHD. So instead of classifying ADHD as its own disability category, it is a subcategory of other health impairments, but it does account for 2/3 of the other health impairments. Students identified with other health impairments have limited strength, vitality, or alertness, including a heightened alertness to environmental stimuli, resulting in limited alertness with respect to the educational environment. So students with ADHD have difficulty paying attention to academic and social activities, organizing tasks and activities, and listening when someone is speaking. Students may also have difficulty waiting for their turn, staying seated, and they also may talk excessively. So some ways to help my students with ADHD is to set goals for them and to teach organizational skills. So some of the goals that I can help set are study times and test percentages. And then for the organizational skills, I can help them with that by having colored folders that for each subject is a different colored folder. So English would be blue, social studies would be green, etc. So then when I said, could everyone please take out their social studies folders, or when I asked them to put something away in their social studies folder, it would be very easy for them to identify that and would help their organizational skills. The fourth disorder that I am going to be talking about is emotional and behavioral disorders. So these are an inability to learn that cannot be explained by intellectual, sensory, or health factors. an inability to build or maintain satisfactory interpersonal relationships with peers and teachers, a general pervasive mood of unhappiness or depression, a tendency to develop physical symptoms or fears associated with personal or school problems. So some examples of these emotional and behavioral disorders are anxiety disorders, mood disorders, and even schizophrenia. Some ways that I can help my students with these disorders are to connect with them and check in regularly, or it was also suggested that there are some apps that can be used on their student devices that help self-monitor their behavior. The fifth disorder that I'm going to be talking about are intellectual disabilities. So intellectual disabilities are defined as significantly sub-average general intellectual functioning as existing concurrently with deficits in adaptive behavior and manifested during the developmental period that adversely affects a child's educational performance. So this disorder used to have a crude name, and President Obama in 2010 changed the name from mental retardation to intellectual disabilities with the agenda of erasing the use of the R word. It just came with a lot of negative connotations, and so they wanted to change the view of that and really just get the negative connotations away. So for intellectual disabilities, there are two major characteristics: limitations in intellectual learning and limitations in adaptive behavior. So limitations in intellectual learning include memory and motivation, and limitations in adaptive behavior include conceptual skills, which include language, reading and writing, money concepts, and self-direction. Social skills, which include responsibility, self-esteem, goalability, and rule following. And practical skills, which include activities of daily living, occupational skills, and maintenance of a safe environment. So some of the ways that I can help my students are to get Rocket readers. It suggested e-readers, but it also said that a lot of times students with intellectual disabilities, even though those e-readers have the function to read aloud to them, they struggle with this, and so Rocket readers were created, and it's much easier for them to work that. I can also help these students by including lessons outside of the normal curriculum. So some of the lessons that I can include are applied money concepts, grooming and self-care, leisure activities, health and safety, and career education. These students with intellectual disabilities just take a little longer to learn these adaptive behaviors, so it was suggested that we incorporate them into our normal curriculum. The next disorder that I'm going to be talking about is autism. Autism is a disability that significantly impacts communication and social interaction. So there are two major domains of autism: social communication impairments, which include nonverbal communication, maintaining relationships, and social emotional reciprocity. And then also repetitive restricted behavior and interests, which include repetitive speech, excessive reliance on routine fixated interests, unusually excessive or limited reaction to sensory input, which include touching, smells, or lights. Autism also, you can be low functioning or high functioning. High functioning autism, it means that they can communicate, they can participate in class, and they might have trouble with certain subjects. Low functioning autism means they can't communicate, they have trouble listening, and they go at their own pace. How I can help these students is to set routines and letter strategies. So setting a routine makes the students feel more comfortable, and also getting to know them. Earlier in the year, we had talked about how one teacher got to know her student and discovered that he really liked cars. And so to teach him colors, she used different cars. And so that is also a way that I can help my students, is just by getting to know them and knowing what works for them. The letter strategies are to help with the memorization. And so one of the letter strategies that I can use is acronyms, and this would just help them with memorization for things that we do in the classroom. The next disorder that I will be talking about is hearing. So there are two different types of hearing loss. Deaf is the hearing loss of 70 to 90 decibels or greater, and hard of hearing is the loss in 20 to 70 decibel range. These students have difficulties in speaking, reading, and writing. Students can acquire the skill of speech reading, which is lip reading. Many students also use the American Sign Language. Some students can also acquire hearing aids or cochlear implants. And how I can help these students, I can get a teacher of the deaf in my classroom. I can have a paraprofessional in collaboration with a speech language pathologist. And also, it was suggested that I teach them their native language. Not teach them, but help incorporate it. And if they do struggle with it, do help teach it. But also have them socialize with deaf adults. This is so that they can thrive in both the deaf community and normal society. The next disorder that I will be talking about is traumatic brain injuries. Traumatic brain injuries are an acquired injury to the brain caused by an external physical force, resulting in total or partial functional disabilities or psychological impairments, or both. So, traumatic brain injuries most commonly come from falls, but can also be the result of sports or car accident. Some of the symptoms often include confusion, blurry vision, and difficulty concentrating. Treatments for TBI include rest, medication, and occasionally surgery. How I can help these students in my classroom is to allow extra processing time and work time for assignments and tests. And also, some of the teaching strategies are frequent student responses, monitoring their responses, and giving frequent feedback to them. The next disorder I will be talking about are vision disorders. So, vision disorders happen when parts of the eye or brain that are needed to process images become diseased or damaged, causing severe or total loss of vision. There are many different types of visual impairments, including low vision, functionally blind, and totally blind. And the characteristics for vision differ from person to person. How I can help these students are to provide experiences for missed incidental learning. I can also have lessons transcribed into Braille and or magnify the worksheets for them. The last disorder that I will be talking about is giftedness. Giftedness is not easily defined, but generally it is students have an above average IQ and are well above their grade level. Gifted students are usually identified in their early school years, and some students may be gifted in certain subjects but struggle with others. Gifted students also can have a hard time socializing. How I can help these students are to challenge them at a higher level, teach to their interests, and design activities that help students move up the taxonomy. So those are some ways that I can help gifted students, and that is the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for watching.